There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody to another Nova Scribes. This is again this is Retooling You, part of our Retooling You workshop series that we're doing for two purposes. Number one, to help you launch a facilitation practice that'll give you what you need to know about the business, and then second, about what you need to know about the tools and techniques. Tonight, we are going to jump into what I think is the most important thing that you can do in any group. In fact, when you don't do this with groups, you're almost guaranteed to fail in a facilitation. So this one's going to cover a facilitation technique called the meeting startup. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but sometimes I go into meetings and the organizer, the convener will say, okay, well, everybody knows everybody. We all know why we're here. And let's just go ahead and get to work. Okay. I think that you're just asking for trouble because you're assuming that everybody does know everybody and they also know why they're there. And chances are somebody hasn't read the email, somebody hasn't got the memo, but they're not there for the same reason. I'm going to get more into that in just a second. But let me just go ahead and jump to the end and show you the tool that I've got for you, which is the meeting startup. So we're going to start on let me zoom out a little bit on this one. Here we go. Okay. So we're going to use, in order to get there, we're going to use this template, which is called the meeting startup. Of all of the Grove templates, this being one of them, this is the one that I use all the time. Now, I want to just make a caveat to this. I did hand draw this, but I got permission from the Grove to be able to do that for these workshops. If you want to use this particular template, the right thing to do is to go to Grove Tools, and I just dropped the link into chat, is to go to Grove Tools and buy the template. They have digital versions. They've got large 4x8 versions. They have small tabletop versions that are 11x17. This particular one, since you're using it to frame the day, I just get the wall version and then go from there. So let's go ahead and walk through this. So I'm going to use my stickies for this. And by the way, I think it's a good idea to build this using stickies. Okay. When I use this template, I actually use it a little bit backwards, and I'll show you why. I actually like to start way out here in the starburst with outcomes. Okay. So the starburst is the outcomes. This is our destination. And this particular template uses the metaphor of a river rafting trip in order to get there. And so the starburst is, this is our purpose. This is why we're here. If you attended the workshop that I did a couple of hours ago on discovery, this is the restatement of what is it that you want to achieve. So again, this is our purpose. This is our why. Now, sometimes, we've got somebody else joining us. Let me let them in. So sometimes we get into some of these meetings and there are like 5 or 6 purposes. I don't know about you. I can only remember 2, maybe 3 things at a time. And so what I would say is that limit your outcomes to what can fit in this starburst. Like keep it limited to just 2 or 3 things. Again, I like to start here with outcomes, beginning with the end in mind. You know, why is it that we're here? What is it that we want to achieve? Let's see. Let me get my camera to catch up with me. There we go. Hi. Hi, Zakia. Glad you can make it. So again, the first thing that I say when I start a facilitation is right here. Here's why we're here. Here's what I want to achieve. Okay. The next one that I'll go to usually lives over here, and that is the agenda. Let me pull this over a bit. There we go. The next thing that I go to is the agenda. The outcome gives us our why. The agenda gives us our how. Here's how we were going to achieve that. Okay. We've got our outcome. We've got our agenda. Now, usually at this point, when I share both of these things, I walk through the agenda. I say, what questions do you have with regards to our outcome or agenda? And I pause right there. What I don't say is, does anyone have any questions? Okay. So Mary Jo, Zakia, Nancy, what's the difference between saying, does anyone have any questions? And what questions do you have about the outcome or the agenda?
What questions? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary Jo.
Go ahead. I was just thinking it was a little bit more targeted versus what questions do you have? It's like, it just really, Zakia, it encourages actual thought.
I think it's also more of an invitation.
Yep.
as opposed to a demand.
Yeah, exactly. There's an assumption and a presumption that's built into what questions do you have, that you have questions. Okay. And so it makes it a little bit easier to say, hey, I know you have questions. Just go ahead and tell me what they are. Right. So what questions do you have? That's an open-ended question. Whereas, does anyone have any questions? That's a closed-ended question. You're much more likely to get questions if you want them by saying, what questions do you have? Okay. All right. Let's do this one next. The next one that I do, it sort of depends on the mood I'm in, whether or not I do the rules, okay, which live up here, or the roles. Let me make sure I got that right. Sometimes I swap these too. In fact, Mary Jo, can you do me a quick favor? Can you click that link I just dropped into chat and make sure that I got those right? Yep, I did. Nope,
Yep.
I didn't. I swapped them.
Rolls on top.
Rolls on top. That's right. Rolls
Yep.
on top. Rolls on top. Rules on the bottom. That's right. Okay, I forgot my own mnemonic for this one. So notice how the rules are below the ground. Those are the ground rules. Get it? So ground's down here. That's where the rules go. I knew I had a mnemonic for it. I lost it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the roles. So typically when we've got people, well, actually, let me finish out the model, then we'll go back and do each one of these individually. But we've got the roles of the people that are in the room here. And then we've got, of course, our ground rules. Okay. Now let's take a look at each one of these in its pieces and parts, and then I'll actually give you a bonus, which is another way of hitting the roles. But we'll go through each one of these in its parts. You don't have to use this template for this, but I do think that it is critically important that you have this represented in some way in the room, whether it's on flip charts or on a PowerPoint or something else. I started kind of teasing at the questions that people have when they come into the room. This answers about 99% of them. The outcomes say, why are we here? The agenda says, here's how we're going to get there. The roles say, here's what I need to do individually. What are you looking for from me? And the rules are, here's how I can show up as my best self. So the rules are what sets the container for psychological safety for inclusion. They say this is okay, and then this is not okay. All right. There's a lot of different kinds of meetings that we go to. You're a different person when you're at church or in the locker room. And what the rules tell you is, all right, what kind of meeting are you in? All right. So let's take a look at these individually then. Outcomes, I already touched on this a little bit. Again, with outcomes, keep it to 2 or 3 outcomes max. Any more than that, people have a hard time remembering what's there. Okay. The outcomes should speak back to what you did with your discovery call. When your client told you, here's what I want to achieve. You just lay it out right here. 1, 2, 3. As soon as we do these 3 things, we're done. Okay. Let's jump over to the agenda. Here's a way that I like to do an agenda. Again, this is just me. This is a little bit different than the way the Grove teaches, but this works for me. So typically what I'll do is I'll just write the times of the big moving blocks on sticky notes. So for example, we might meet from 8 to 9. This might be the meeting startup itself. Might be some sort of orientation, might be sort of like introductions, maybe an energizer or an icebreaker fits in there. The next thing will be, well, whatever's on the agenda. But I really like to build it using sticky notes, okay? I do this for a couple of reasons. First of all, sometimes if we get into a meeting and somebody says, hey, by the way, the CEO wants to talk for 30 minutes, I can move some things around and make that okay. The other thing is that if we hit something that's particularly hot and we decide that, you know what, this is really more important than some of the other things that we've got on the schedule, I can move this around. So I like to do agendas on sticky notes. The way that I build agendas is I start with my start. Okay, what's my start time? What's my end time? Is there something that is like a fixed point, like lunch? And then I just build in between whatever's there. Okay. Now, before I get too far off of agendas, what questions, comments, insights do you have about agendas in particular? Mary Jo, Nancy, Zakia, Russ, nice to have you.
Doing it on sticky notes seems absolutely brilliant, and I'm embarrassed I never thought to do that. But it provides infinite flexibility to be able to really demonstrate that your sensitivity to the group, adaptability, willing to do what's necessary to meet their needs. So that's brilliant. I'm
Yeah.
so excited you shared that.
And to your point, Nancy, I'll often do this, like I'll have this up during a design call with my clients where it's like, okay, let's build this thing together. And I mean, the agenda then serves as, really the bones of the facilitation, right? Okay. By the way, for those of you just joining us, I'm going to drop a link into chat. So rather than collecting donations for this one, what we're asking is that you donate to our friend and colleague, Heather Martinez. Heather's husband, Ray, recently lost his battle with lymphoma. Hope I got that right. And they need some help right now. And so I just dropped Heather's GoFundMe link into chat. Yeah, it was lymphoma. Pretty sudden, I think. He really started that in the summer, actually at IFVP, and he just recently passed away. So whatever you would send to NovaScribes, whether it was enough to buy us a coffee or something, please send that in Heather's direction. She would really appreciate it. She's had a huge influence on NovaScribes and me personally. In fact, she was the first NovaScribes presenter. So she goes back a long way in this community. All right. Anything else on agenda? Mary Jo, it looked like you had something, but I could have misread it. Okay, let's keep going then. Cool. All right. Now let's talk about the fun stuff. Now, I think in general, most facilitators are pretty good at doing the outcome and agenda. I mean, most of them will do the agenda at least, right? I think a lot of facilitators will miss on roles and rules, okay? Now let's cover the easy ones, all right? So what roles do we typically have in terms of the people who are in the room? Who's in the room usually? I'll give you a hint. If it's a facilitated meeting,
The facilitator,
you got a facilitator.
the participants. All right.
Yes. All right. So we'll do facilitator. Now, normally I do this last, but just, to go through this, let's get it up there. Facilitator. I'll also throw the recorder. So whoever's working with me as a graphic recorder there, I'll put it on. I may have a note taker that's there, but I will always define for the participants, what their role is. And we'll get back to that in just a second. When you say facilitator, though, what is the role of the facilitator? What's a good way to say that?
In charge of the process.
Yep, you're in charge of the process. Yep, that's how I do it too. I usually say I guide the process. Okay, and that's it. I leave it at that. This is also to say, hey, listen, I really don't. What happens in the room is up to you all. You are responsible for the outcomes. You're responsible for the decisions. I'm just the process person. That's my loyalty. I'm not loyal to anybody else that's in the room. Role of the recorder is, well, to record the process. So even if somebody hires me just to do, we just want you to do a facilitation. We don't want any of that visual stuff. I'm like, okay, great. I'm still going to be having a graphic recorder with me. Like no matter what, I'm going to have a graphic recorder because of what they do for the process. Okay. Now, participants, this one's a little bit trickier. Okay. The good news is that if you attended the last one, you know what the answer is. Okay. So let's go back to that spectrum that I drew out for you with the discovery call, because this is where that fits in. So if you remember, there are 4 kinds of meetings. And this is a question that you ask your clients at the very beginning. So to quickly recap, there are those meetings where it's a tell, and the purpose of which is to inform and direct. There are those meetings which it is a sell, the purpose of which is to motivate and to persuade. There is a consult, purpose of which is to provide advice and feedback. And then there is a co-create, the purpose of which is to gather ideas, decide against those ideas, and actually execute against those ideas. Okay? All right. So keeping that in mind, we've already had this conversation with our clients. Let's say that this is a tell. Let's say that this is a conference. Okay? There's going to be panel discussions. There's going to be keynotes. There's going to be presentations. What are we telling the participants their role is in this meeting? If it's a tell, what do you think, Mary Jo?
To listen.
To listen, right? To listen. What else? Yeah, Mary Jo.
Maybe there's a time for questions. Yeah, I got listening. Maybe a time for questions.
Listen, ask questions.
Maybe.
Yeah. And hopefully, I mean, just say it. We want you to learn something. We want you to take away something. We want you to go away, with something that you can use. So you're explicit about the role. All right. Let's say that it's a sell. Remember, the purpose of that is to motivate or persuade. Maybe I'm the boss. I'm coming in with this bright idea. I want you to get on the bus with me. What am I telling the participants their role is in that meeting?
Listen, question, evaluate, or you want them to buy in, but they might not.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, Nancy. Yeah. I want you to buy in on this, right? I'm gonna share something with you. I think this is a good idea. I want you to think it's a good idea too. To be explicit about my intent, right, in sharing this thing. A lot of the times when we do one of these things, it's like we feel like we can't really tell them. It's like, well, why can't you tell them? It's if you don't tell them, you're going to erode trust because people are going to be like, what? This guy's like trying to sell me something. Be explicit about this. Listen, I think this is a good idea. I think you'll think it's a good idea. I want you to buy in. I want you to go along with me on this one. That's why I've invited you here. So hear my case, ask some questions, and let me know if you're in. Okay? That's a sell. A consult, remember the purpose of a consult is not to make decisions, but to get advice and feedback. So let's say I'm the boss. I think, let's do this thing. I want to hear your ideas. So what am I telling the participants their role is in the case of a consult?
To offer feedback.
That's exactly it. I want your advice and feedback. Show me the gaps. Give me your ideas. What am I missing? I will still be the one making the decision. If I'm the leader, I'll still be the one making the decision, but I do want your advice and feedback. I just got off a call with a client where we did a discovery call, and it became a consult when the context of this is that there was a consortium, a group of wildly different stakeholders that were all coming together to get to know each other. They had first reached out to me. They said, we want a strategic plan, right? I looked at what they were trying to do. I said, you really don't want a strategic plan. You think you do, but you don't. What you want is you want to get to know who's in the room, figure out what they're working on, and then get their advice and feedback about what you can all work on together. But this is what you just outlined is not a decision-making process. It's an advice process, right? Okay, so again, if it's a consult, you're explicit about it. You're saying, okay, here's the feedback. Come over here. Here's the feedback and advice that we're looking for from you. Finally, if it's a co-create, remember, this is where the group is responsible for ideating, they're responsible for making decisions, and they're responsible for executing. So what are you telling the participants their role is?
Just what you said. Listen,
That's what I said.
Offer ideas, make a decision. Yeah.
Yeah, we want you to make some decisions here, and we want you to execute on these things. That means there can be no good idea fairies. There is no staff that's waiting in the wings to take all of your great ideas, right? If you bring it up, you own this thing. So you're going to own the ideas and you own the outcome. Zakia, I noticed your hand. What's going on?
Yeah, so when we're talking about the idea fairy and facilitating environments where people feel, that there's the safety psychologically to share their ideas, what do you do when you get crickets? Because I've been in situations where I'll say, okay, give me what you got. And it's like, I can hear the crickets.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good. So let's skip over someplace else then. All right. I need a little bit of blank space to explain that dynamic. Okay. That's a really good question. I think it's worth a quick divergence. All right. So let's say we're going to make a bad assumption. Let's say that this is energy. And you could read that as participants' energy, their degree of participation, their degree of engagement. And this line is time. Now, the bad assumption that we're going to make, Zakia, is that we're going to assume that people coming into the meeting have, let's see, where's my red marker? That people coming into the meeting, here we are coming in with high energy. That may or may not be true, okay? But just for the sake of the example, we're going to assume that they're coming in with high energy. Now, here's what happens. What we typically do is we say, well, we need to get everybody on the same page. So we're going to do a presentation. And so we're going to, throw a PowerPoint at them for the next half hour. Oh, and then the CEO really wants to talk. So he's going to talk for another hour, or she. And then, we really want to hear from experts. So let's do a panel discussion. And they're going to talk at you from, for the next hour or whatever. And it's going to be presentation after presentation after presentation. Okay. And what happens is that over time, eventually, and it's actually pretty fast, people will drop into what I like to think of as movie mode. That is your passive receive mode. Okay. It's the same as if you were sitting in a movie theater, eating popcorn, watching the Avengers movie or whatever it is, right? But you go into passive receive mode. And so I find it one of the funniest moments in any meeting is where somebody has just lectured for 90 minutes and then they say, are there any questions? And then they get crickets because, you've just thrown everybody into passive receive mode. So Zakia, that's first of all, that's what's happening. Have you observed that?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Okay. And I didn't even put two and two together that, yes, what we did preceding those questions is what matters. Did I drain the life out of you before asking you to put your creative hat on? Such a great point.
Right. So here's a couple of ways out of that. The best thing to do is to provide quick bursts of engagement and interaction. So maybe we do listen to a presentation, but then we give them something else to do that's a little bit more engaging. Something that's like, I don't know, answer a Mentimeter, or turn to the person sitting next to you, or let's do, some shared breathing, but something that brings them back into, a little bit more of an active role. And so one of my dear friends and colleagues, somebody by the name of Ray Ringel, has got a great metaphor for this. She describes it as doing a HIIT workout, high intensity interval training. And the idea there is that if you've ever done one of those, you work out, and then you rest. And then you work out, and then you take a rest. And so the best thing you can do is to inject these quick moments of interaction. Let's say, though, that you are in this place, you have no control over the agenda, and your participants have indeed entered into movie mode. Okay? Best thing to do is keep them from going there, but let's say that they have. Mm-hmm. I think that there's two good ways to get them out of that, okay? One of them actually comes from the US Army. It's called a think, write, share. And here's how that goes. Okay, we're going to give you 60 seconds to think about what you just heard and to, for example, answer the following question. And you have a really powerful question that goes after that. 60 seconds to do nothing but think about what you just heard and to come up with an answer to this question. Then we're going to give you 60 seconds to write down your ideas or your answers or your questions or whatever it is that you want to see from the group. Then we're going to give you 60 seconds to share what you've got. And by the way, it will be 60 seconds or less because people are just going to be writing or reading whatever it is that they wrote. Now, if you've got a small group, and when I say small, I'm saying like less than 24 people, you can do a quick go around or a round robin or a serial share, whatever you call it. And that is enough time to be able to hear from everybody in the room. Okay. If you've got a bigger group than that, though, you might skip the share and just have them write it down. Okay. And then you collect it later. Or you do, rather than doing a serial share, you could do what's called a popcorn And a popcorn debrief is we say, all right, what were some of your burning questions that came up, or what was a really great idea that you came up with? But what you're doing here, Zakia, by doing the think and the write, is that you are easing people back into the active participation mode. You're not throwing them into the pool. You're allowing them gradually work their way back into that active participation. So a think, write, share is a great way to pull people up. Here's another way to do it. It can be really intimidating if you're in a large group to say, okay, what are your questions? Especially after a big presentation. And so a good way to get people participating is to do a pair share, where it's like, okay, you just got some really good information from Bob. Bob, thank you very much for sharing over the last 90 minutes, that PowerPoint. It was gripping. Okay, everybody, before we move on to the next thing, what I'd like you to do is to turn to the person sitting next to you and reflect on what you just heard. What stood out? What are your highlights? What questions do you have? What comments? What would you add to what you heard? Go ahead, take just about a minute or two and talk to the person sitting next to you. The time is yours. You shut up, you get out of the way. Then you do another popcorn. Then you do a popcorn. So, all right, we'd like to hear some of your ideas. Once you bring it into the large group, what did you hear from each other? What both of these do, again, is it's like easing into the cold water, right? It's rather than shocking somebody by saying, okay, what are your questions? Now say that in front of 100 people. It eases them in. Zakia, does that help?
Without a doubt, you make the big bucks for a reason. Your brain is amazing.
You seem cool. We need to hang out. I'll send you my info. All right, let's go back to this. So if we're talking about the participants, hello, come here, little camera. Sometimes it can't follow me. Let's go back to the roles for a while, because again, this is something that I see facilitators skip all the time, and it drives me crazy. I'll tell you why. When we skip this, people come into the new social environment, the new social container of a facilitated meeting. And what they do is that they go back to a place of strength. So if you follow, Strengths Finder, positive psychology, appreciative inquiry, all that good stuff, it's strengths-based leadership. It's strengths-based psychology. When they go into a new environment, it's like they say, all right, why am I here? Why was I hired? What are the strengths that I bring to the table? Now, if you have, for example, a bunch of subject matter experts that you've invited into the room, as we often do, what they're going to do is they're going to say, well, I was invited because of my subject matter expertise. Therefore, I'm going to look for the best opportunity to elocute. I'm going to share my subject matter expertise. I'm going to lay it out all over the table. If you have people that are a little bit more junior in their career, if they're a little bit more on the admin side, they'd say, well, I'm an admin person. I'll just kind of hang out in the back. If they're a CEO, or if there's C-suite top leadership, well, I'm here to make decisions. So I'm gonna say, well, we should do this and we should not do that. Well, that's great, but that may run afoul of the purpose of the meeting, right? You might have a whole bunch of subject matter experts where it's like you have to say, no, sir, you're here to listen. So shut up and color. Don't say that. But they may need to salute smartly and get in line with some of these things. So rather than having people guess at what their role is, tell them. Be really explicit about it. If you don't do that, it's almost like you're asking for disruption in the meeting. So I underscore roles just because I think it's the biggest area of opportunity. It's the thing that most often facilitators will skip. It is also the thing that can make the biggest impact in terms of how people show up. Okay. All right. What questions do you have about roles before we move on? Okay.
Do you ever have a situation where someone rebels against that?
Against the roles?
Yeah, like if you are prescribing what the role should be for the best outcome of this meeting, and you happen to have someone that thinks that they know best, have you ever had to deal with that?
I've had people rebel against the process that we were doing, but I've never had anybody rebel against this, because usually this is something where this isn't decided by me, by the way. Whether it's a tell, sell, consult, or co-create, that's decided by my client. That's decided by the person who's actually hiring me. Usually that person is in the position of authority. Okay. Now, Zakia, it sounds like, first of all, it sounds like you deal with some difficult crowds, which sounds like fun. We should share some notes. If I think that I'm going to get resistance in the meeting, well, first of all, let me give you a resource for that one. Okay. I would highly recommend the book Flawless Consulting by Peter Block. Okay. The front half of the book is a little technical. It talks about like, here's what you have to do in order to stand up a consulting practice. The last half of the book is gold. I think it's actually chapter 13, if I got that right, where he talks about overcoming resistance. And there, he's got some really, really good techniques in that. Here's something that I like to do before the meeting in order to kind of, shortcut the resistance. One of my favorite things to do is to say, hey, when I'm talking to my client, is to say, before we actually have the meeting, I would like to do a little bit of extended discovery. I want to do an environmental scan. And I want to give people who are going to be in the room a chance to weigh in on the design of this meeting. And so what I'd like is, sir, ma'am, please give me a list of people who you think make up a pretty good cross section of the kind of personalities and stakeholder groups that we'll experience in the meeting. Okay. Usually I shoot for between like 10 to 20% representation. So 100 people in the meeting, I'm going to have 10 people that I talk to. There's a couple reasons that I want to do that. I also tell them, I also tell my client, listen, I don't want your raving fans. I want people who are at all places of the adoption curve, including people who are not your friends. Okay. And the reason that I'm doing that, Zakia, is because I really want those folks who are on the right side of the adoption curve, which is to say they're not quite on board yet. I want to give them a chance to empty their emotional backpack with me, one-on-one, prior to this meeting. I want them to feel like, it's not just a feeling, they actually have this, but I want them to feel like they've actually been able to put their stamp on the design of this thing. Because when they feel like they've got a little bit of a say in the design, they have some ownership over the outcome of the thing. Far less likely to have somebody throw resistance at you if they were actually included in the design of this thing. Okay. The other thing is, and I mentioned this before, is that sometimes when we bring people together, we create containers of such safety that people don't necessarily show up as their best selves, and they use it as an opportunity to air grievances. Okay. Doing one-on-one interviews with folks gives them a chance to empty their backpack and air their grievances with you before you get in the room so that they don't bring all that stuff out in the room. Does that make sense? All right. Vic, I noticed you came off mute. Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I'm a woman.
Oh, sorry. I've only known guys named Vic. Nice to meet you. How's it going?
Yeah, I get that a lot lately. I'm really Victoria, but I go by Vicky. And ever since I started going by Vic, people are like, huh, what? Like, yeah, something named Vic.
I had a friend named Vic. He was a great guy. Nice to meet you, Vic.
So this is the first time I'm joining a meetup event with this group. So thanks for hosting this, Brian. And
Nice to have you.
I kind of got on a little late, so I'm not sure if this question is within the context of this the topic of tonight's call. But I do some workshop facilitation as well for my full-time career as a teacher, and then also for my side hustle as a wedding and event planner and,
nice.
and a career coach. So this question is kind of random, but I also lead some meetup groups as well in the DC area. And recently, somebody who I don't know from a different meetup group that he and I belong to, he DM'd me on Meetup a few days ago, and he's I guess he's some kind of loving dating coach. I'm not sure, but he DM'd me up to introduce himself and say, "Hey, Vic, I want to know if I could pick your brain on some ideas on some events I could host for couples to help couples improve their communication with one another." Nice. Because he sees from my Meetup page, I'm a wedding and event planner. Now, he and I have tentatively agreed to meet on Zoom this Friday at 3:30, but I've had many bad experiences over the years of providing consulting to people for people how to plan events, and then I don't get profit in return, or they don't want to hire me to host events for them. So I really want to charge this person a consult fee, but I don't know. I mean, how should I go about this? Should I tell them, okay, I can meet for you? Because I'm very busy and I'm tired of working for free.
Yeah. It's a little, that question's a little bit out of scope for what I'm going over. However, let me give you a quick hit on this one. I don't suppose you happen to use Calendly, do you, to schedule?
I've never used Calendly before, but I'm aware of it.
Okay. It doesn't have to be Calendly, but there are certain scheduling apps where it's like, okay, in order to have this design consultation, that's what I would call it, right?
Exactly.
Here's the link that will schedule us a time together. And by the way, here's where you can enter in your credit card or your PayPal or whatever else it is. So that kind of thing, Vic, I would call that a design consultation, and I would absolutely charge somebody. Now, there's also on the flip side of things, there is the stuff that we do for free, which we call business development. Okay. So that might be your own sense of, all right, how far can I take this with this person just to show up as, well, somebody who might be a good design partner. But that's got to be your own call. And it's kind of, I don't know anything about weddings. I've only had one. So it's really like, okay, how deep do I go with this person before I start charging them? I wish I could tell you more, but that's all I've got.
It's not. No, he doesn't need my consulting with a wedding. He like me. He's an event producer, an event planner, and he's simply looking for ideas on events to help couples increase their communication skills. And so he's consulting me for that advice. And what I'm saying is, I've had too many experiences over the years where I've given people consulting and then I don't get paid for my efforts.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, Vic, let's do this. We are just about at the end of this thing. Okay. We do this thing at the end of Nova Scribes. It's called the Nova Scribes after party after I stop the recording.
Okay.
Why don't we hit that during the after party? Can you hang out a little bit?
Does it last past 6 o'clock?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. I should be able to hang out. Thank you.
All right, cool. Let me finish this up then. All right.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So let's do ground rules. Now, here's the thing. I don't love the word ground rules. Somebody tells me that there's a rule. My inclination is to say, all right, well, how can I bend it, break it, get around it, do something else? I'm very averse to rules. I don't know why that is. I probably had a much, happier childhood in public education if I could have done that, but there you go. So I prefer to say agreements. That's just me. Although occasionally I will have people that will say, well, wait a minute, why are you calling these things agreements? I didn't agree to any of this stuff. And it's like, no, I'm giving you the opportunity to agree to it, right? You can do that. Another word for this is principles. So you can call them principles if you want, operating norms, whatever you want. Pick the one that works for you. It's all the same stuff. Okay. So I again, just like with outcomes, what I would say is limit it to 3. Don't go beyond that. By the way, if I mute you, it's not personal. It's just that I'm picking up a little bit of background noise. You can always unmute yourself. Limit it to 3 because, again, that's about as many as anybody can hold. But here's the one that I always end with, okay? So I might have 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 ground rules, but the one that I'll always end with is make requests. Always. And then to that point, I say, okay, speaking of making requests, what other ground rules might you add? If we consider our outcomes and our agenda and our roles, what else do we have to do to set up this space such that it's successful, right? And I really let that sit. Now, oftentimes people will say something about electronics. Sometimes they'll say something about having fun. I always get have fun. I'll get something about respect. I'll get something about listening. But in that case, back to, let's see, where was it? Nancy dropped this into chat. People support what they help to create, right? And so if you give them the opportunity to actually add some rules, they are far more likely not just to adhere to them themselves, but to hold each other accountable to that, okay? All right, so to recap, we've got the meeting startup, also known as the ORS chart. Reason it's called the ORS chart is because if we take outcome, agenda, roles, and rules, OARR, you've got ORS. Not only that, you've got this fun little mnemonic here of everybody paddling together. Oh, there's some ORS here, and then you could even extend the metaphor if you want to. Occasionally, I'll use the same template to say, all right, what are the rocks that we might hit? What are the rapids, right? What are the what are like the mini goals, the small outcomes that we might achieve along the way? So you can really take this metaphor and extend it out quite a bit. This is another thing. This is kind of neat. So if you take a look at the drawing here of the template, you've got a few things going on, but what's interesting about it is that everybody's got a different colored hat. Now, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but Nancy, Mary Jo, you might be familiar with the work of Edward de Bono, right? And the six hats. Okay. I think that this is just too close, right? I don't really believe in coincidences. Nancy, do you see it? Okay.
Six thinking hats.
Yeah, there's four in here, but it's not that hard. Like if I wanted to, I could add an additional person on this thing, right? And sometimes when I do the six hats, I don't go through all six of them. I mean, it's just kind of rigorous, right? But you could point to this and label it as the six ways of thinking. You could do for example, the disc, right? So you could say, hey, we've got four different types. You could do, I don't know, the Myers-Briggs temperaments. You could do pretty much any of those personality assessments that breaks people into four groups. And boy, there's a ton of those. So you could use this as a way of just heightening and underscoring that this is a group that has got some cognitive diversity, and that's good. We're bringing in a lot of different perspectives, but we all have our role. Okay. And that's the ORS chart. Okay.
Wow.
What questions, queries, insights, comments? What have you got before we close this and we move into office hours? Nancy, how'd that go? Just because you're off mute.
It was great.
Cool.
It's fantastic.
Cool. I hope you use it. It's a really, really powerful tool. Zakia, questions, comments?
Yeah. I don't want to sound like I'm gushing, but like this was amazing. Like I loved everything about it. And the fact that you could anchor it by calling it the ORS chart, it just solidifies everything for me, that this is something concrete and reproducible that we could easily be able to pull off.
Yeah, this is a good one. Again, let me tell you a quick story, okay? If you're going to do one thing with a group, this is the thing to start with. This is what frames the day. This is like an ounce of prevention almost is worth a pound of cure. This is it, right? Quick story. When I was working at a federal agency, I got to my desk one morning and there was an index card that said, it said something in the nature of, okay, Brian, be at this place at this time. And it was like going to be in 5 minutes. So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I started walking, and then this little voice in my head said, Brian, bring your stuff. And so I grabbed a roll of paper, I grabbed my markers, and I walked down the hall, found the place where we were supposed to meet. And I just took a seat along with everybody else around this big conference table type thing. And I didn't know anybody in the room except for one person, somebody who I occasionally worked for. And this person stood up and said, okay, everyone, thank you very much for coming. Brian, over to you. And sat down. Okay. That was it. That was all of the warning that I had. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was getting into. Now, the good thing is that as facilitators, we use ourselves as barometers. If I didn't know why I was there, very likely that most of the people in the room also didn't know why they were there. So here's what I did. I said, all right, everybody, thank you again for coming. Thank you for turning this over to me. I appreciate it. So quick show of hands. Who knows why they're here? And maybe like 5 hands went up out of the 40 that were there. I said, okay, great. Here's what we're going to do. And I hung my paper. I quickly sketched this up. And I said, together, let's agree on our outcomes. Now that we've got our outcomes, let's agree on our agenda. Now that we've got our agenda, let's identify our roles. And just so we know how to be our best selves, let's do the rules. And we built the thing together. Turned out that was an 8-hour meeting that had been allotted. Okay. And I had people walking out of that saying, this is the best meeting I've ever been to. All right. Thank you very much for attending. Just as a quick reminder, let me drop a couple of links into chat. So again, instead of donating to NovaScribes, for now in the foreseeable future, we're asking that you send your donations to Heather Martinez. She's one of the founders of NovaScribes. And unfortunately, she recently lost her husband to lymphoma. So she has a GoFundMe page. She needs the help right now. So if you were going to buy me, a cup of coffee, whatever, channel it towards Heather. If you would like to get a copy of the meeting startup, this is a template that's sold by Grove Tools. And I just dropped the link into chat. Again, they've got it in a bunch of different formats, including a new version of it that is a little bit more contemporary. I still like the yours chart. Okay, and let me go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
So the button to stop the recording is gone. Let's see. Why do they do that? Oh, there it is.